The name Mesopotamia, meaning between the rivers in Greek, was given by the Romans to describe the area between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, which was once Rome's easternmost province. This region now largely corresponds to modern-day Iraq, though historically it included parts of present-day Syria. Mesopotamia is characterized by vast plains created by the alluvial deposits of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, which flow through a rift valley formed by the tectonic activity between the African and Eurasian plates. While the Tigris flows relatively straight through the valley, the Euphrates takes a wider loop through modern Syria before joining the Tigris and flowing into the Persian Gulf. By around 15,000 BCE, the Persian Gulf was not a body of water but dry land. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which now flow into the Persian Gulf, originally flowed south into the Gulf of Oman, approximately 500 miles away from where they flow today. In the Holocene, following 12,000 BC, sea levels began to rise rapidly. By 6000 BC, sea levels were about 66 feet lower than they are today. Between 4000 and 3000 BC, sea levels rose to about 7 feet above current levels. This rising sea level is consistent with a global trend during this period. As sea levels rose, sediment carried by the rivers, called alluvium, accumulated in the Persian Gulf, creating a vast delta that extended gradually southward. This process also led to the formation of freshwater lakes and marshes in the region. The thick layers of sediment deposited by the rising sea levels covers any archaeological evidence of human activity from the late Ice Age or early Holocene period in the lowlands. Despite the challenges in finding physical evidence, it's likely that both hunter-gatherers and early farmers lived in the low-lying areas of the Persian Gulf during these times. They would have relied on the rich resources of the region, such as fish and other aquatic resources, for their subsistence. The dramatic environmental changes at the end of the Ice Age were crucial in shaping the rise of city-states in southern Mesopotamia. Key ecological factors included the drastic changes in sea levels and significant climatic variability, especially during the 5th millennium BC. During this time, summer temperatures were higher, and there was more rainfall, which extended the growing season for crops. The higher water table allowed some areas to be farmed without irrigation, but as conditions changed, irrigation became necessary. Within Iraq, there is a notable climatic divide. The northern and eastern regions receive enough rainfall to support vegetation, while the western and southern regions do not. Agriculture in southern Mesopotamia, or Babylonia, which is the area between modern Baghdad and the head of the Persian Gulf, has always relied on artificial irrigation due to the lack of natural rainfall. In contrast to Syria, in the northern part of Iraq, could largely rely on natural precipitation. Like other early civilizations centered around rivers, such as those in Egypt, China, and India, Mesopotamia depended heavily on its rivers. However, unlike the Nile, which reliably deposits fertile sediment on Egyptian lands, the Tigris and Euphrates overflow irregularly and often dangerously, complicating agricultural activities. Despite these challenges, the abundant water provided by these rivers was crucial for the development of intensive agriculture and consequently early Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamia's alluvial plains lacked raw materials such as metal and usable stone, except for a small limestone deposit near Samawa. The north and east, however, had ample stone, including alabaster from the northeastern mountains used in Neo-Assyrian palaces. The region also imported materials like carnelian, lapis lazuli, and obsidian from surrounding areas. Metals such as copper and silver were sourced from various places, though the exact origins are unclear. Asphalt, a natural resource, was used extensively from around 3500 BCE for inlay mortar and fuel. Mesopotamia's open geography made it a crossroads for diverse peoples, often arriving as conquerors or immigrants. This continuous influx created a rich tapestry of cultures and ethnicities. The earliest written records don't clarify the ethnic makeup of the region's inhabitants, but the Sumerians were likely significant contributors to the early urban civilization in southern Mesopotamia by the 4th millennium BCE. Around the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE, the writing system in Mesopotamia began to represent spoken language more accurately. Initially, documents were written in Sumerian, although many non-Sumerian words, particularly place names, suggest the presence of earlier indigenous languages. This indicates a diverse population living together before the large-scale immigration of the 4th millennium BCE. The use of Sumerian for writing lasted about 2 centuries. When Sargon of Akkad, a Semitic ruler, came to power around 2350 BCE, Akkadian, a Semitic language, became the dominant written language, using the same cuneiform script. However, Sumerian resurfaced for a time before the Semitic languages permanently took over. Despite this shift, linguistic records show that Sumerian continued to be spoken until around 2000 BCE, highlighting the coexistence and intermingling of different ethnic groups. Before 6000 BC, small, self-sufficient villages with populations of 50 to 200 people were common. However, with time these villages started to decline, and people began living in larger towns. As environmental conditions became less stable, interactions between communities increased, likely due to shortages of resources. By around 4600 BC, settlements were connected by canals, pottery was produced using wheels instead of by hand, and temples became more common. Around 5800 BC, the first known farming communities appeared in the lowlands along the Euphrates River. These small communities were often grouped together, with the largest cluster surrounding a larger town that covered about 10 hectares and had a population of 2,500 to 4,000 people. The people in these communities built small canals, up to 5 kilometers long, to irrigate their fields. They mainly grew barley and dates and raised cattle, sheep, and goats. These early settlements are collectively known as Ubaid, named after a small site called Al-Ubaid near the ancient city of Ur. The Ubaid people faced a harsh environment and had to work together as a community to survive. They used the abundant local resources like sand, clay, palm trees, and reeds to build their homes. Creating even a small canal required some level of political and social organization, and maintaining these water systems needed communal effort. The annual task of clearing silt from the clogged river courses and canals was a back-breaking job that required everyone to pitch in. There is a close relationship between the development of a stratified society and the creation of food surpluses. The Ubaid villages developed more efficient systems for producing food, which led to an increase in food surpluses. This success encouraged people to settle down in one place and led to higher population densities. The expanded trade networks, facilitated by waterways, and the distribution of surpluses and trade goods also had an impact on society. The dominant groups within these communities played a significant role in producing surpluses, which eventually supported more people who were not directly involved in farming. The earliest known Ubaid community is Tel al-Aweli, near Larsa, dating back to around 5800 BCE. Over the next few centuries, some of the larger settlements developed substantial buildings, alleyways, and courtyards. In contrast, rural settlements like Ubaid consisted of simple mud brick and reed huts with roofs made of bent sticks. These small clusters of villages shared ceremonial centers and were connected by kinship and clan ties, with one clan authority overseeing the villagers' affairs and managing the irrigation systems. By the mid-4th millennium BC, the climate and landscape in Mesopotamia had stabilized. This stability allowed for the development of large-scale irrigation systems and supported the growth of much larger communities. People who had previously lived in scattered villages moved to more favorable locations, providing the labor needed to build and manage extensive irrigation systems. This period saw the rise of large cities in southern Mesopotamia, which were the first urban societies in the world to develop writing. The formation of these cities between 3500 and 3000 BC coincided with the stabilization of local sea levels, showing how environmental changes influenced the development of early civilizations. Ubaid culture is recognized by a unique style of pottery and a particular house design with a large central hall. A new tool called the turntable was introduced during the Ubaid period, making pottery production easier and faster. This turntable could spin around a central spike, allowing potters to paint decorative patterns like concentric bands on the pottery as it turned. This innovation helped make pottery making more of a profession. The exact origin of this technology is unknown, but it could have come from anywhere in what is now Iraq. The Ubaid houses had a unique design where the central hall was used both as the main living area and as the connecting space between rooms. This was different from previous house designs, where functional rooms were separate from the connecting spaces. This new house design and pottery-making techniques spread throughout the regions once occupied by the Sumeria and Halaf cultures, suggesting a shared network of communication across the Near East by this time. As settlements grew and became more organized, two important concepts emerged: central places and central functions. A central place was a larger settlement that not only served its own residents but also provided services to nearby communities, becoming an administrative, religious, or political center. This relationship between the central place and its surrounding settlements is known as a settlement system. The first examples of public buildings serving these central functions appeared during the Ubaid period, indicating a more complex society. These buildings, identified as temples in places like Eridu or palaces in Awili, likely served as the seats of religious or political authority. As time went on, the small village ceremonial centers grew, including the one at Eridu, which was first settled around 4750 BC. Eridu grew rapidly and featured a mud brick temple surrounded by substantial mud brick houses, often with rectangular floor plans. Craftsworkers lived close to the elite, who were centered around the temple, while farmers lived farther away and grew crops that supported everyone. By 4500 BC, the Eridu temple had expanded significantly, with altars, offering places, and a central room surrounded by smaller compartments. The population of Eridu had grown to around 5,000 people, although the exact numbers are uncertain. The people of Ubaid also engaged in trade, and their distinctive pottery has been found in regions as far away as Iran, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. Excavations at Tel Zaydan in modern-day Syria have provided new insights into Ubaid trading activities between 5000 and 4400 BC. Before the Ubaid period, early settlements were mostly found in mountainous or hilly areas. It wasn't until the Ubaid period that people began settling in the large central plains, which had been sparsely occupied before. Settlements like Susa and Chogamish in Kazakhstan became central places within a three-tiered system of settlements: large central places at the top, smaller centers below them, and even smaller settlements at the lowest level. These central places were large enough to support people involved in public service who relied on others for food, which was often supplied by the surrounding countryside. While it would have been interesting to see how this type of organization developed further, the Ubaid period eventually ended with the rise of urban civilization, marking the beginning of early cities and more complex societal structures. The house with a central hall indicates a new approach to domestic architecture. This central hall was used as both a living space and a connecting area for other rooms, reflecting changes in how people organized their homes. The emergence of public buildings during this period, identified as temples or palaces, indicates a growing complexity in social organization and the beginnings of institutionalized roles within society. Settlements started to show signs of social differentiation, with some residents focusing on public service rather than food production, relying instead on the broader community for sustenance. As settlements in the Ubaid period grew and social structures became more complex, the foundations for early cities and urban centers were established, marking the transition from small-scale settlements to organized urban life. The Ubaid culture may have been a precursor to later Mesopotamian states, influencing the development of both the northern region of Assyria and the southern region of Sumer. Located in the southern region of Sumer, in what is now modern-day Warka, the ancient city of Uruk is believed to have inspired the name Iraq. Uruk is renowned for being the birthplace of several key developments in human civilization. Scholars are drawn to Uruk because it is mentioned as Erech in the Book of Genesis and plays a central role in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known literary works. Written around 2100 BCE in Akkadian on clay tablets, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts the legendary king of Uruk's quest for immortality. The most complete version of this epic was found in the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal in Nineveh of modern-day Iraq. According to the Sumerian king list, Enmerkar founded Uruk, followed by kings Lugalbanda and Gilgamesh. Between the 9th and 4th millennia BCE, the Fertile Crescent saw a rapid societal evolution. By the 4th millennium BCE, southern Mesopotamia, especially Uruk, began to stand out, transforming into the first urban society by 3200 BCE. This shift, known as the Uruk Phenomenon or Uruk intrusion, saw the city's material culture spread far and wide. The Uruk period is divided into distinct phases. The early Uruk phase, between 4000 and 3500 BCE, reflects continuity with the earlier Ubaid period in architecture and ceramics. During the Middle Uruk phase, between 3500 and 3300 BCE, urbanization accelerated and Uruk expanded its influence across southern Mesopotamia. In the late Uruk phase, between 3300 and 3100 BCE, the city saw significant architectural and cultural advances, including the development of proto-cuneiform writing and the construction of large public buildings. The transitional period, also known as Jemdet Nazar, between 3100 and 2900 BCE, witnessed continued changes with architectural evolution, shifting pottery styles, and ongoing use of proto-cuneiform. This era gave way to the early dynastic period, marked by the rise of city-states in southern Mesopotamia. By 2350 BCE, the region had been unified under Sargon of Akkad. Around 3200 BCE, Uruk experienced rapid growth, becoming significantly larger than previous settlements from the Ubaid period. It covered approximately 250 hectares and had an estimated population between 25,000 and 50,000 people. The city boasted grand artworks, vast public spaces, and the earliest form of writing, which marked a leap forward in its development, challenging the notion of gradual, steady growth. Many parts of Uruk were left largely undisturbed for nearly 2,000 years, from the mid-3rd millennium to the 7th century BCE. At the city's center were two large public areas. One may have been enclosed by a wall, while the other might have been open. Initially, these areas were separate settlements on opposite banks of the Euphrates River, but by 3200 BCE, they had merged into one city. The Western District, later known as the Anu District, housed a terrace with a temple dedicated to the sky god Anu. The Eastern District, known as Inanna, was the worship center for the goddess Inanna. Excavations at Inanna uncovered a variety of buildings of different sizes and functions. One large hall could accommodate up to 300 people, while the smaller white temple in the Anu district held only about 10 to 14 people. The larger buildings in Inanna may have been used for governance in addition to religious purposes. Over time, these structures were carefully dismantled, leaving only their foundations, with no artifacts remaining to clarify their original function. While some evidence suggests ritual activities took place there, practical uses, such as heating in winter, cannot be entirely ruled out. One notable building in Inanna had a large basin, possibly linked to rituals, and another small building featured columns decorated with intricate mosaics made of colorful clay cones. These structures were likely tied to central organizational functions, though it's hard to identify clear religious connections. At the time, most public gatherings were deeply linked to religious beliefs, so cultic activities may have been broadly defined. Inanna also had an economic role, with remains of metalworking shops, pottery kilns, and large amounts of industrial waste. Thousands of clay fragments and tablets were found, many of which had early forms of writing, primarily related to economic administration. About 80% of the written documents recorded financial data for a central economic system, illustrating the city's importance as an early hub of trade and governance. The early systems of record keeping, such as counting marks and tokens, led to the development of writing, specifically proto-cuneiform. In the 6th millennium BCE, people used clay to seal containers or secure knots on bags, pressing seals into the clay to show ownership or responsibility for goods. To make the seals unique, complex designs featuring humans or animals were used. By around 3200 BCE, these seals evolved into small stone cylinders, 3 to 5 centimeters long, with intricate patterns carved onto their surfaces. Rolling these cylinder seals over clay left a raised impression, allowing for more detailed and unique designs than earlier stamped seals. The presence of these seals indicates organized economic activities at that time. Clay tablets were also used for economic administration. Using a stylus, people made marks on the clay to represent numbers and words. For example, when counting animals, they would divide the tablet into sections, each representing different information, and record the total number on the back. This writing was often shorthand, leaving out verbs and prepositions, making it harder for us today to understand these ancient texts. A base 60 and base 10 numbering system was used, influencing how we tell time today, 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. Specialized number systems were used for different items, such as one for barley. Many types of goods were recorded on these clay tablets, with food, especially barley, being the most common. Unfortunately, these records don't reveal the origins of the goods or who delivered them, including items like live animals, dairy products, and metals, whose origins are particularly interesting to researchers. Around 3000 BCE, one text records deliveries to 4 people, identified by their titles rather than names. Interestingly, about 20% of the early written records are lexical lists of related words, such as types of animals, trees, cities, or professions. Some lists even arrange job titles in a hierarchy, reflecting the social structure of the time. These lists were highly valued and copied for centuries, even when some words became outdated. They may have played a key role in developing the writing system, especially in scribe education. A list of professions offers a glimpse into the political structure, starting with the title, later translated as king, followed by roles such as leader of law, leader of the city, and leader of the assembly. These roles suggest a structured society with a clear division of labor. The inclusion of a leader of law is unsurprising, as large communities needed rules to resolve conflicts, and the leader of the assembly aligns with ancient texts, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which mentions city elders acting as a check on the ruler's power. No obvious government buildings have been found from this period, but it's likely that the buildings in the Iana district serve political and economic functions. Society was clearly hierarchical, with later parts of the titles list showing different ranks within the same job, suggesting an advanced division of labor. For instance, a metalworking workshop found in Uruk shows workers organized under a coordinator, indicating a sophisticated work structure for that time. There is also a debate about the language of proto-cuneiform. Some scholars believe certain signs represented the Sumerian language, while others argue proto-cuneiform focused more on documenting transactions than recording spoken language. By the start of the 3rd millennium BCE, both Sumerian and Semitic languages appeared in texts. The cult vase from Uruk shows a clear example of hierarchy in ancient art. Made of limestone, the vase is decorated with 4 bands of carvings that increase in height from bottom to top. Starting at the base, wavy lines symbolize water. Above this, the first band shows ears of barley and palm shoots. The next band features alternating male and female sheep. The 3rd and 4th bands depict human figures. In the 3rd band, naked men are shown carrying baskets filled with agricultural products. The 4th is the first to present a complex composition as the main scene. Although the section containing the main figure is severely damaged, what remains of this figure, as well as comparisons to other compositions, indicates that he was the ruler. He is preceded by a servant carrying offerings, while another servant walks behind him, carrying the ruler's richly decorated train. In the vase's original form, the ruler was depicted as taller than the other figures, showing that he was considered the most important person according to the ancient Mesopotamian code of representation. The scene also includes 2 sheaves of reed, which stand for the temple of the city goddess Inanna. Instead of showing the temple as a building, The vase presents it as a collection of sacred objects, including animal figurines with human figures on their backs and containers for offerings. The cult vase itself was part of a temple's collection. In the artwork, the ruler is performing a duty worshipping the city goddess, represented by her high priestess. Other artworks from the same period also show the ruler in the center, such as in a lion hunting scene where he's shown bravely attacking lions, a privilege reserved for rulers. On cylinder seals, the ruler is often seen overseeing the punishment of prisoners or feeding animals, showing his role in governance and symbolic rituals. Interestingly, no other figure plays such a central role in Uruk art, and there is no clear representation of priests or religious officials. Religion was deeply integrated into daily life, but didn't always leave visible traces in art. However, the close connection between cities and their deities shows how important religion was, even if it isn't always obvious in the surviving artwork. The ruler priest was a prominent and symbolic figure in Uruk society, often depicted in art with distinctive attire like a brimmed cap, a long kilt, and a bun hairstyle. This figure represents a high-ranking official, combining both religious and political roles. Such representations highlight his importance in various activities like ceremonies, processions, and even combat, often linked to the goddess Inanna. The ruler priest appears in Susa as well, indicating a close connection between Uruk and Susa. While the ruler priest was a major authority, the Uruk society was likely not a simple monarchy. Instead, it might have included elements of multiple governing bodies and possibly competing social groups. This is suggested by the presence of large assembly halls and complex social interactions. During the Uruk period, pottery styles shifted from Ubaid to distinct Uruk ceramics, marked by the introduction of the potter's wheel around 3300 BCE. Notable features include conical bowls, jars with varied rims, and decorations like incised patterns. A key artifact, the mass-produced bevel rim bowl, likely used for food distribution, makes up about 80% of ceramics from the period. Stone vessels, mimicking pottery shapes, were used in rituals. Recent research suggests that bevel rim bowls found as far as Pakistan were part of local traditions, not foreign imports, reshaping their cultural significance. Uruk period sculpture and cylinder seals provide a detailed view of life during this time, highlighting various aspects like farming, animal husbandry, and horticulture. The artwork, including cylinder seals and carvings on stone vessels, often depicts animals and humans in roles such as slaves and prisoners. A key figure in Uruk's art is the ruler, shown as a priest, shepherd, warrior, and hunter. These artifacts are crucial for understanding Uruk society. Cylinder seals, the most common form of sculpture from this period, often tell stories or show sequences of events. The Uruk vase offers insights into the worldview of the time. Other stone vessels, such as those with animal friezes, were likely used for ritual purposes and are considered prestigious items. By the Middle and Late Uruk periods, cylinder seals began replacing older stamp seals, and new techniques for creating seals were developed. The exact origin of the cylinder seal is still debated, but it is clear that Uruk seals were used for various functions, including marking storage containers and documents. They were a tool for control and communication, particularly in trade and administrative contexts. Uruk seals come in two main styles: individualistic seals with elaborate designs of animals and mythical creatures, and simpler seals with basic patterns. There is a notable difference between Uruk seals and the Jemdet Nazar, which often depict women and domestic activities, suggesting different roles or economic activities within society. In the 4th millennium BCE, cultural practices from Uruk in southern Iraq spread across a vast area, reaching as far as eastern Iran, Anatolia, and even the eastern Mediterranean, including Egypt. Sites with Uruk-style artifacts have been discovered in a broad range, from southern Mesopotamia, including major sites like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu, to areas in Iran such as Susa and Choga-Mish. In the Gulf region, connections with Mesopotamia decreased around 4000 to 3800 BCE, but were later re-established. Notable links include Bahrain and the Hafid culture in Oman and the UAE. Recent excavations in eastern Iran and Pakistan have revealed evidence of Uruk-type materials, such as bevel rim bowls at numerous sites. However, it is complex to determine whether these sites were directly influenced by Uruk or simply shared similar materials. Overall, the Uruk phenomenon reflects a network of cultural and economic interactions across the ancient Mesopotamia. Several factors likely contributed to this expansion. One key factor was the rapid population growth in Uruk, driven by new technologies in farming and animal care, advanced administrative systems, and complex governance structures that came with urbanization and the rise of early states. The environmental changes, such as shifts in the water table and climate, may have influenced population movements. During the late Uruk period, for example, settlements in Uruk's hinterlands increased, while areas in Iran saw a decline. This pattern suggests that the spread of arid conditions pushed people to settle in more hospitable areas within southern Mesopotamia. Southern Mesopotamia, where the Uruk civilization thrived, had very few natural resources apart from water, clay, reeds, bitumen, and some timber and stone. To meet their needs, the people of Uruk relied heavily on importing materials from distant regions. They imported stone like diorite, metals like gold, silver, copper, and tin, and timber such as pine and cedar. The sources of these materials, particularly during the Uruk period, are not fully understood and may differ from those in later periods. For example, precious stones such as lapis lazuli, turquoise, and carnelian might have come from Iran or Egypt, while silver could have been sourced from eastern Anatolia or southwestern Iran. The scarcity of essential resources in southern Mesopotamia likely drove the development of a broad trade network. This network required permanent trading posts along key routes to facilitate the movement of goods. Traders and possibly itinerant artisans traveled these routes, spreading technologies and cultural practices related to agriculture, horticulture, and animal husbandry from the Uruk heartland. Uruk colonies were particularly prominent in northern Syria, at sites like Habuba Kabira and Tel Brak. These colonies were strategically placed along river valleys like the Euphrates, Tigris, and their tributaries, as well as other major waterways. Boats and rafts were crucial for transporting goods, especially heavy cargo that wasn't suitable for donkey caravans. Tepe Gora, a trade hub located along the Tigris route, played a significant role in trade networks. It was well positioned to acquire goods from the surrounding regions, including exotic items like lapis lazuli from the Zagros highlands. The exact nature of Uruk period long-distance trade, whether it was balanced, unequal, or driven by military power, remains unclear. Trade during the Uruk period likely led to conflicts with local communities along the trade routes. As valuable goods were transported over long distances, protection was necessary to prevent theft, and some Uruk sites may have been established to secure these routes. Although direct evidence of military involvement is scarce, recent findings from Tel Hamakar in northeastern Syria suggest that warfare was a significant factor. The site showed signs of destruction and invasion around 3,500 BCE, with numerous sling bullets indicating a major battle. This suggests that Uruk might have been involved in large-scale warfare, possibly related to trade or other issues. The increase in walled settlements in northern Mesopotamia and Syria during the late Uruk period likely reflects these conflicts or the threat of them. In the Uruk period, a special type of seal called city seals was used in various places, including Uruk, Jemdet Nasr, and even in modern Iran. These seals featured names of different cities and were used to mark documents and goods. Although the original seals are not available, impressions of these seals have been found on various objects, dating from the end of the Uruk period into the early dynastic I period. Research has shown that these seals were important for recording and verifying transactions. For example, texts from Jemdet Nasr and nearby Tel Uqair list items like figs, fish products, and grape goods, and were sealed with a city seal. This suggests that these seals were used to acknowledge and process goods, possibly for religious or administrative purposes related to the goddess Inanna. These seals indicate that Jemdet Nasr was linked with Uruk and show connections between different cities and regions. A similar seal found in Iran suggests that Uruk had trade connections extending beyond Mesopotamia. These findings help us understand the trade network of the Uruk period and the importance of organizing and documenting trade and political relationships. The Uruk period marks an early example of state formation, characterized by urbanization and Uruk's role as an administrative hub. This development brought about specialized labor, hierarchical organization, and extended Uruk's influence over surrounding regions. Key aspects of the spread of Uruk culture include city growth, social hierarchy, advanced administration, trade, warfare, and religious practices, such as the worship of the goddess Inanna. The transfer of technologies and ideas, like the use of official seals, helped integrate Uruk's culture into neighboring regions. Uruk's major contributions were in writing and administration. Its writing system evolved into cuneiform, later adopted by later cultures like Ebla. By the end of the 4th millennium BCE, Uruk's power declined, with weakened ties to southwestern Iran and the rise of Proto-Elamite writing. This decline may have been influenced by climate shifts and migrations, though the exact causes remain uncertain.